Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm Liza Lawrence. I'm glad to have you join me as we celebrate wonders and miracles together. I am here today with Alyssa Winslow from Utah, and she's going to share really a beautiful journey, a tragedy, and some miracles that happened in her life. She's also written a book. She's an author of a book called After the Victory, and it's a beautiful book. So we'll tell you where to find that at the end, but I'm just so grateful you're on. Her story really starts in 2015 with a car accident and her husband and daughter who were killed in this car accident. And so she's going to share that story and some of the things she learned through that and the miracles that she saw as well. So Alyssa, thank you so much for being on, and go ahead and tell us your story.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's truly a privilege. So like you said, my story, at least this specific story, starts in 2015. My family and I were living in Layton, Utah at the time, and we were traveling north to Pleasant View to visit our family for Sunday dinner. On the way, a doghouse had fallen from the back of a pickup truck, and they had slowed traffic to try and remove this doghouse. And in the process, as we slowed, the person behind us did not and hit us going 80 miles an hour. Tragically, my husband, who was 30 years old at the time, passed away instantly. And my 4-year-old daughter she had a faint heartbeat. So they transported her by ambulance to McKay Hospital in Ogden. And they worked on her for a short period of time, but sadly, she also passed away. And I had my other 6-year-old daughter at the time. She experienced a severe traumatic brain injury, and was life flighted to Primary Children's in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'll start my story there, because from that moment through the next month and year, we saw so many wonderful miracles in the hand of God in our lives. So I was also transported by ambulance to McKay Hospital. After having a CT scan and x-rays and multiple other tests, they discovered that, at least at that time, I only had 6 broken ribs and multiple lacerations. And there was lots of glass in my eyes. And during that time, I was wearing contacts. And so they had to remove my contacts. And so I was kind of seeing through this foggy lens, if you will. I couldn't really see anything because my eyesight was not the greatest at the time. But if you backtrack a little bit, right when the car that hit us, the moment of impact, I remember feeling this intense pain, the most intense pain I've ever experienced. So much so that I blacked out. But when I blacked out, I remember all that pain just subsiding and disappearing, and all the chaos of the scene around us changing to this serenity, this white. And I can't describe really the image. It almost as if I was flying, but it was almost as if I was in this peaceful dream, this other reality. And I remember kind of hearing laughter and joyous reunion almost, it seemed. And it seemed like that was even part of the reunion, but kind of as a onlooker looking in. And then I was in the middle of this moment of serenity, and I hear my daughter calling, "Mama, Mama," with this kind of panicked cry for help. And I apologize if I get a little emotional, but that call, I knew I needed to heed that call. And so even though I wanted to stay in this moment where I was free from pain and free from all the sorrows that could potentially await me, I heeded that call, and I knew that my daughter needed me. And as soon as I made that choice, all this pain came suddenly right back. And I was right back where I was, feeling all the intense pain from 6 broken ribs. And later I find out that I also had a broken disc in my back and a perforated bowel. So all of that pain that I didn't know I had really was this culmination of where I was at. And I could not move. I was just wedged in the passenger seat of our Mazda car. And I remember looking to my left and just barely tilting my head and seeing my husband, and it looked almost as if he was sleeping. And so I remember saying to him in a low whisper, "Ryan, don't leave me," because it's almost as if my spirit knew that maybe he had gone on. But this is the first miracle of this journey. We had our puppy Archer in the car as well, and he was in the back seat with our two girls. As I was looking over at my husband, I remember seeing little Archer just rest his head in between him and I. And I remember that giving me so much comfort. I also remember thinking, oh, poor Archer. I'm sure he's just in just as much pain as me. And I had that empathy for my dog, but it also comforted me. I love the hymn, the all creatures of our God and King. And truly, God has blessed us with the birds in the sky and the trees, the animals in the field, dogs and animals, pets to give us joy. And in that moment, my dog Archer truly was a gift from heaven. And I later find out months later that Archer had been thrown from the vehicle and was not in the car. This is the only angel I've ever seen or claimed to have. I stand by that I did see my puppy. And that's the only angel that I've ever seen. It was in dog form.
That's amazing. I
Yes.
love that. So he was not in the car.
He was not in the car. And when I was relaying this story to my mom and dad and anyone that would listen, because I would tell them, it was as if I was in this dream. And then when I came back, I saw Archer and he was right there. And they would all just be like, oh, yeah. But they all knew that he wasn't in the car, but they didn't correct me.
Wow. I love that. And it's interesting. Animals, I've heard that animals, this is one of the reasons they're good for therapy, is they do transmute emotional pain and can sort of move that energy away. And so I think that, who knows, but that's amazing that he was your comfort at that time.
Isn't that amazing? So that was one of the first miracles. Obviously, word spread fast, and we had many, many people praying on our behalf and fasting on our behalf. And so our family definitely was benefactors of those fasting prayers. And so my daughter, Kaya, who survived the accident, like I had mentioned earlier, was life flighted to Primary Children's. And she had hit her head so hard that her brain was beginning to swell within her skull, so much so that she began having seizures. And doctors were worried that they were going to have to drill into her skull to relieve this pressure. And it's a pretty serious procedure. So she was in the PICU, or the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at Primaries, for the first 24 hours. And they were really debating going back and forth because she kept having these seizures. Well, within the next, by 24 hours, she had stopped seizing, and her severity level had improved significantly, that they didn't have to perform that really critical procedure. And within 48 hours, she was discharged completely from that PICU and was downgraded to immediate care, and then was even released from the hospital before I was. And to this day, if you know she's now 13, she is a thriving, beautiful, intelligent girl. And by looking at her, you wouldn't even know that she experienced such trauma. And I can only attribute that to the grace and goodness of God and miracles, because every time I look at her, I think, what a walking miracle, and a daily reminder that miracles are truly all around us. Even when I was in the hospital after I was transported to McCady Hospital, at that time, they only said I had 6 broken ribs. And I think it was because the first CT scan I did, I was just terrified and I could not hold still. I would shake. And I guess this is also, you could count this as a miracle too. Just the goodness of angels on earth. And my ICU nurse, he could tell that I was terrified and that he knew probably the dire situation I was in even before I did. I remember him saying to me, "Would you like me to hold your hand? Until you go in, I can hold your hand and I can comfort you." And most of the time, I feel like I am this brave exterior, I can do it on my own type of personality. But at this moment, I was more than willing to accept that outreach of empathy and love. And so I said, yes, can you please hold my hand? And that was at least something that could calm me enough, because I had never been in a enclosed cylinder, had to have a CT scan ever in my life. And so just the idea of having to do that and feeling the way I was feeling at the time, it was just something I did not want to do, nor did I think I could do. So he held my hand until, like, obviously he couldn't while I was in there getting the imaging done, but I'm sure I was still shaking. I remember him saying, you need to hold still the best you can, but I'm sure I was still like shaking like a leaf.
Well, do you think too, you were in shock? I mean, when your body's in shock, it trembles. And
yes.
I mean, I'm sure that was part of it too. Like
I think
my body's
so.
had a major trauma.
Yeah, I think it was just it was trying to process all of the things that were happening. So I will always remember my sweet nurse, and he even came into my room later that evening as I was admitted overnight to come in and check on me. In fact, I think this was a hinge point and a turning point in my choice to move forward with faith and hope in a higher plan for me, because he came in so just kind of distraught and like worried and just wanting to like nurture me any way he could. And I remember asking him, I don't know why or where this thought came from, but I just remember saying, John, and we'll call him John, are you a religious man? And he said, that's kind of a random question, but I'm not really a religious man, but I would say I am a spiritual person. I said, do you believe in God? And I think he did. He believed in a higher power. And I said, well, I do believe in God. And I know that if I turn toward him, if I lean into this experience, then he will never leave me. And I felt that dedication to him. Like, I'm going to choose to turn towards God instead of let this, that could potentially cause me to be angry or resentful. And I'm sure I had moments of being resentful and alone and angry, but at that moment, I decided to choose to turn towards him. And because I made that conscious choice, I think it was a hinge point and a ripple effect of how I was able to cope with such a devastating loss and how I could turn that into hope and healing in the long run. And it's really been a foundational thing for me in my faith. That experience, those experiences are just kind of a tiny little glimpse into the miracles that we witnessed just even in the beginning. They discharged me from McKay when I was visiting my daughter at Primary Children's. I just felt horrible. But even on the drive to Primary Children's, I could just feel myself and my health and everything, just mental state, everything just kind of spiraling and feeling just awful. And when we finally get to primaries, and during that drive in my head, I was rehearsing, like, how do you even describe and tell a 6-year-old that her father and her sister have just died? And I had maybe 10 minutes to read a pamphlet about talking about death to a child before I left. And they said, don't use words like pass away or, try to use, death is so they understand it and there's no confusion. But I was still like, oh my goodness, how do you tell someone that news? But I did know that I wanted to be the one to tell her. We got to the hospital and I was able to be reunited with her. And I think too, that was a miracle because we had been apart. It seemed as if it was a lifetime. When we were holding each other and embracing each other, it was as if it had only been a moment. There was nothing sweeter. I think family relationships, especially relationships between a mother and a daughter, are so strong. I just remember holding her, just allowing myself to revel in that moment and be present in that moment and not worry about, okay, what's coming next? What do I have to say next? I finally was able to build up the courage to explain to her that she had just lost her dad and her sister. And the miracle, too, of just the understanding of children, their trust. And yes, it hit her with such force and she cried and just rested and cried into my chest, she understood it, and she knew that it was going to be okay. And she knew that she would see her dad and sister again. And she did. I remember her saying, I miss them so much. And it had only been 24 hours at that point. But it's truly something to think about, just like how you can miss someone, even in a short amount of time. And I could completely agree. And I remember saying, I miss them too. It seems like they've been gone a lot longer than they have. But that was definitely a bonding moment for us, and something that I think has really cemented our relationship now. She is one of my dearest little buddies, my best friend, still, her mom and that guide, that teacher, that disciplinary, but my friend and someone I adore being with. And I think this experience has just brought us far closer than we probably ever would have been otherwise. So I try to think of that too, like use this experience to think, some moms don't ever, and I think most moms probably do have good relationships with their children, but something like this has just drawn us far closer than I think life would have allowed otherwise. So that's pretty neat to think about. And then I later was admitted to the U of U hospital, and they found out that I had a broken disc in my back and a perforated valve, along with the 6 broken ribs. And so they had to do emergency surgery. And I was there for another 8 or 9 days. And, just a miracle of how the short amount of time that I was in the hospital, they were worried that I wasn't going to be able to make it to the funeral. In fact, I passed all the tests with, being able to finally eat solid foods. And I was really worried about whether or not my stomach and my gut had healed properly. So I had to make sure I passed those tests. Miraculously, I did in that short amount of time. So that was a point for me, not against me. But the thing that was challenging for a long time was the fact that I was having a hard time. I just couldn't keep anything in my stomach. Everything made me so sick. And eventually, I think I had a sweet social worker too, who was a miracle, an angel to me. She also taught me to just visualize, to be still, and to focus my energy on my home. And I think she probably had envisioned me focusing on my earthly home, which I did. But in a way, I was also focusing on my eternal home, my sweet angels in heaven that I had just lost. When I was able to, especially like you were talking about trauma and shock, and I was experiencing that on and off all throughout my stay at the hospital, I would shake and there was nothing I could do. I would try so hard to will myself to stop, but I just couldn't. Until I met Leslie, and she kind of just taught me that skill of visualization. And all it was on home. And that one thing, I was able to kind of will my body to stop shaking and to just be still. And because of that, I think I was able to use that skill to will my body to see my body keeping nourishment in my gut and in my stomach, and, like having it work properly. And I'm sure angels and so many other people's prayers all contributed to my fast recovery. And so the day before Ryan and Evee's funeral, or I guess the viewing it was, I had finally got all the drains and tubes and epidurals and things removed. And the only thing left was my feeding tube, because they wanted to make sure, like, even though I was eating solid foods, they had left that in to make sure, like, okay, she's good. Because even the solid foods I was starting to eat were coming right back up. And they weren't going to let me leave until I could prove that I could keep solid foods down for a significant amount of time. And I was so worried that I was not going to make it to their funeral because of this one thing. I just remember kind of being a little hopeless, a little bit like distraught, and kind of had this moment of despair. Like, what do I do? I've done everything I know how to do. God, please help me. And I had this thought that the medication, the pain medication that they were giving me might have something to do with it. And so I said to my nurse, I think I want to go without the pain meds. And she was shocked. She was like, and I even was shocked, because going from the epidural that was kind of constantly giving me pain relief, taking that out and still feeling all the pain that I did. I'm like, I don't know why I want to do this either, but I want to get out of here. And so I was able to go off that completely. And I was able to keep my food down. So there was a correlation with those medications and my ability to keep food in my belly. And so I was able to go home, and I consider that a huge miracle because I wanted to be at my sweet husband and baby's funeral, not just at the funeral too, but I wanted to be able to prep them for the casket. And I hadn't seen my husband since that moment in the car. And I looked at him and I said, don't leave me. And I remember finally being able to go to the funeral home and be able to dress them. And I just remember lying on his chest and holding him and just crying and allowing those emotions to finally manifest themselves and say goodbye. And it was a very sacred moment that I wouldn't have had I not seen the miracle of God helping me through that hospital experience and inspiring me to think that maybe this medication wasn't quite working with my body the way that they anticipated. I was able to even do my sweet Evee's hair and dress her, and my cute mother-in-law had been looking all over for just the right dress to bury her in. She was able to find it, and it fit perfectly. She also was trying so hard to find the right pair of shoes, white pair of shoes, and for a 4-year-old. I remember her telling her the size, and when we went to go put them on, they were too small. And she was like, oh no, she was feeling so horrible that she had gotten the wrong shoes. And I had this thought, and I feel like it was my sweet Evee saying, it's okay, Mom. Remember how I didn't really like to wear shoes? And I just enjoyed running outside in my bare feet. And so we took that as a sign from our sweet Evee that this is how she wanted to be. And so we just put her in cute little white sockies instead. I was able to be there and to say my goodbyes and have those sacred experiences there at the funeral home that I otherwise wouldn't have had. So I definitely count those as miracles. And that's just in the initial 2 weeks of the accident. We continued to see so many miracles, both divine ones and earthly angels. Our neighborhood was all of our neighbors. They had just come together. They wrote the sweetest cards of encouragement. We had people tie white ribbons to all the trees as you entered into our subdivision and all around our home, kind of just to let us know that they were there for us, that we had this support system and that they weren't going anywhere. And that really just gave me so much hope and so much peace, knowing that we weren't going to be alone. Even though I felt so devastating alone, I knew that God had blessed us with so many good people and so many earthly angels. Even with my recovery too, people were so concerned that I would need to have some extra care in the home. I wouldn't be able to go up and down stairs and walk and kind of provide for Kaya and myself. So my mom has said, we're going to probably have to have you move in with us after, and Grandma and I will take care of you and it's going to be okay. Kaya, for a child being totally thrown off your normal routine and schedule, also having such a devastating loss as the one we had experienced, just threw her for a loop. And kind of on the surface, she seemed like, she was doing remarkably well, until one day I remember her just having this meltdown of like, Mom, I just really want to go home. And for me, where I was still physically, I still felt like I needed help, and emotionally thinking about all the things that were home that would potentially bring up emotions and memories, it just all seemed so overwhelming and hard. But I really felt like she needed to go home. So I told my mom, I said, I think we need to be at our house amongst the familiar. And I think that'll be what Kay needs to kind of combat all the emotions and the anger and the things that she was battling at the time. So my mom was supportive and she moved in with us for a little while, but it truly was almost like night and day. The moment that we got home, Kaya felt a sense of peace, a sense of familiarity. And I think that's a miracle too. Just again, me visualizing home and then being home. There's so many applications of home. And if we can keep that our focus and try to make our homes, places where the spirit can dwell and that can be like a temple. And that is what Kay needed. She needed to be in the temple, her home. And she did see this remarkable recovery. And even I did shortly after. I was a runner. I still am a runner, but I had obviously been running. And I really wanted to get back to my pre-running state. And I started out very small, and I would go walking in the meantime, we had gotten another dog, Mick. And so I would go walking with Mick. And I remember one specific day just feeling like, I'm not getting anywhere. I don't feel like I'm progressing. But then I remember just having this thought to close my eyes and just to feel the sun just kind of hugging me. And I remember thinking that it was almost as if this Savior was hugging me and telling me it's going to be okay. And you can do this. So I allowed that feeling and the sun to just envelop me and hug me. And when I opened my eyes, I said, I'm going to try to run. So I started at a slow jog. And Mick kind of stayed up with me like, this is different. We're actually going faster. And then before you know it, I was at a pretty good sprint for just a minute, not long at all. But I felt so weightless and so free. And like I was headed the right direction. And then it was going to be okay. And then I actually had to stop because I wasn't quite ready to sprint yet. But and then I just continued walking after that with this hope and this faith that from that point moving forward, we were going to make this work. Doesn't mean that it was going to be easy. There was many more moments of tears and feeling inadequate and alone. But each time God was with me. God was with us. Angels were with us. And here we are today, 7 years later almost. God was very influential, and my Ryan angel was very influential in helping me find my husband. That's another miracle, because I had this really high bar. I was like, I'm never going to get remarried. There's no way. My heart is so given to Ryan. There's just no room for anyone else. That's what I was thinking until Kaya started expressing just, I'm a little lonely and I would love brothers and sisters. And to be honest, I was really lonely too. And so I almost would pray, as if you will, to Ryan, if this is supposed to be, if I'm supposed to find another companion, will you help me find someone similar to you who has great faith, who is a presiding male in our home that can bless our home with the power of God. I need that. I missed that. And so sure enough, within the right time frame, Ryan helped me find my new husband, DC. And he is a miracle in of itself. He's genuinely kind and good. And he has this faith so similar to Ryan. I think about that all the time. I'm like, they're both very deep thinkers. They have such strong testimonies of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's like, I couldn't have handpicked him better, So I think in the world we live in, that's a miracle to be able to find really righteous, good men who honor their role as a father. And that's DC to me. And it's amazing, a miracle too, of how your heart can embrace and love. And that was just what I learned through this whole journey, is that it's like your first child. You think, oh, and then you find out you're going to have another one. I love this baby so much, but I just am a little worried that I'm not going to be able to love this new baby as much as I love this one. And somehow our hearts are able to just embrace and love and envelop this new baby. And that's what I feel like I was able to do with DC. He really just fits right into my heart, and his girls have just fit right into our lives. Doesn't mean that we haven't had our challenges, but it has truly been such a wonderful journey, and one that I'm really excited to keep moving forward with. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
It's beautiful. So beautiful. And I'm happy for you that you have found someone that you love so much. Like you said, that the love expands, right? It doesn't divide, it grows.
Yes.
And so I love that you saw that, because I would think I would go through that very same thing. And I'm sure most, when they've lost a spouse, would feel that way. How could I ever love someone else? And I do love that the heart knows how to grow and love.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And it will, if we allow it. And if we kind of make that choice, like, okay, I know I'm here. And that's what I had to do. I had to think, I am kind of lonely and I would love companionship. I don't know, like if I'm ready, but I'm willing to take the leap. And when I did that, truly God provided. Ryan helped me. And I truly believe that it wasn't coincidence that I found this remarkable man that I was so drawn to pretty much instantly. It was almost as if we, like by divine design, were brought together, because even my husband has a pretty remarkable story of his own. And maybe he could even come on your podcast
I would
and
love
share
that.
his story.
I would love that. Ask him.
I will.
Because I know in your book, you do mention you were in that moment of conflict, like, should I pursue this? Is this okay? And it was really Ryan who you felt give you a divine message, which I think is miraculous as well.
Yes, it really is. And I think if we're willing to listen for those messages from heaven, and they can come in so many different ways and forms. And for me, I was in this bit of conflict, like, okay, I found someone that I want to give my heart to. And I already have, but I just don't know if I'm ready to like commit and make this something that could potentially go further and become a spouse for me. I remember partying with DC after spending an evening with him, driving home, just kind of in tears over it. Like your emotions and your logical brain and all the things are just like butting head. Like, I know that's how I feel, but I feel like I'm almost, betraying Ryan, even though I've been asking him for all this help. And a song on the radio came, it wasn't on the radio, it was on a playlist that, not ironically, DC had created for me. It's a Christian playlist, and artist Matthew West's song, I'm All In, came on. And the lyrics to that song, I'm sitting there in this turmoil of like battling my emotions and my, all of the thoughts that are going through my head. And I stopped just long enough to listen to this song, and those tears of worry and resentment and fear changed to trust. And it was like Ryan was telling me, it's okay, you can be all in. And I really like the phrase, head first to the deep end. This is going to be hard, but you can do it. I helped you find him, and he is meant for you. And at that moment I knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to be all in then. I'm going to try my hardest to make this work and really give my whole heart to DC. And I have been able to do that. And it's been a fun journey to see our relationship grow and the trust that DC's had in marrying a widow. Right. And after he was divorced previously. So having gone from that trauma of having a marriage where you thought it would work and then discovering that it didn't, and then having faith and trust that I'm willing to marry someone whose marriage was really great, to go into that with an open heart as well and embrace me and Kaya. And there's so many amazing dynamics to that in and of itself that I think are so remarkable and miraculous. And
I love that you can see that the Lord was directly involved in all of that, and that he is meant for you. I love that message. And that this was part of God's plan for you and him. I think that's beautiful.
For both of us, for our children
and your children. Yeah.
That orchestration too. We all needed each other, and our family relationships been a little challenging. To blend a family, that's a whole nother story. Totally. But it's been a journey, and we're willing to accept our weaknesses and just the experiences we have and use that for growth and to propel us forward. So it's all been a wonderful, wonderful journey that I would not trade. I know some people are like, oh, I can't even imagine going through what you have. And I look at others and I think the same thing. I can't imagine going through what you have. And the fact that I have been dealt this experience And now looking at myself now to who I was before, I've just grown in so many miraculous ways that I honestly don't think could have taken place. And there's so many times that I'm like, whew, but I'm reminded that I can do it. And that it is by divine design that I'm here and that Kay is here and that DC is in my life and that our girls are in our home and in our family. It's not a coincidence. And I truly, truly believe that.
I love that. Well, I've been crying through this whole story because it's so
I'm so
sweet.
sorry.
No, it's just so tender. I want you to talk about your book and the title, After the Victory, because I love how you came up with this title, and then also tell us where people can find the book if they want to read the rest of your story.
My first husband, Ryan, as he was leaving his mission, he was so worried about potentially losing that testimony and faith that he had gained over the 2 years he'd served. And he had this exit interview with his mission president. And he said, "Mission president, how do great men fall?" Because there's lots of examples of this in the history of our church and just all around us. People who see great success and then end up falling away. And his mission president said this, well, I want you to think about this. It's after a victory. And the application comes when, if you think about in the Book of Mormon, there's so many examples of people. Captain Moroni was one of the greatest army leaders, and he was always preparing his troops for the possibility of attack. And because of that mentality, keeping his eye on after the victory, what's next? What can I do better? How can I improve? That's how he was able to gain advantage over his enemy, never letting his guard down and always trying to look past a certain victory. And that's the application, is that after the victory, well, what's next? I reached this goal that I've been working towards. And instead of just patting yourself on the back and saying, okay, and then being done, look past it and say, okay, I reached this. Now how do I take one step further, one step higher, and climb. And that's the application for it. And that's what Ryan really, he just gravitated to that message. And he even took the opportunity to share that message with our family before he passed away. That's also another miracle.
Yes.
He felt inspired to share that message with us. And now, because he did that, and it was something that him and I would talk about frequently in our marriage, but I feel like we're able to carry on his legacy and this message and this idea that he held so dear to thousands, and whoever, I don't know how many people will eventually reach out, but I'm hoping the more people we can spread the word to, the better, that it will touch their lives. And it's almost as if Ryan's touching each of their lives too, because this is something that he was so adamant about, and an idea that he just was so passionate about. And even my new husband, DC, he's a musician, and he wrote a song called After the Victory that is the same idea. And it's a really inspiring song too. And you can actually download, there's a QR code in the back of the book. You can scan that. It'll take you to our website. And then from there, it'll show you all the different places you can listen or download and look to his song. But it's also really neat that he's able to share his gift of music as well. And I'm able to share my gift of the written word. He's a songwriter and I'm a story writer. So it's fun that we can combine those gifts and talents to help just influence others and help inspire others. So that's pretty neat. It's been a fun thing.
I love that. So where can they find your book, and what's your website as well?
So the website is afterthevictory.com, and you can find our book either there or on Amazon. And you can just search After the Victory, and there it will be. So
I love that. Well, it's a beautiful book, very well written. You can tell that you are a writer, that you're a storyteller. I love it. And I did listen to DC's song. It's beautiful also. Does he mostly do Christian rock? Is that his genre?
That's his genre, is Christian rock.
That is awesome. Well, Alyssa, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And it really was an honor to hear it and to emotionally go along with you for just a moment. I love that this story still touches your heart, and it will touch the hearts of all the listeners I know. And so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. And yes, it does. It definitely touches my heart. And if you catch me, I can't read my own book without crying. So
I cried many times. I'm reading it late at night, wiping my tears because it's very tender, very tender.
It is.
And
it's very raw and tender. So
yes,
listeners, make sure you have a tissue.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you.
Thank you for letting me be here. So
thank you so much for listening to this miracle story. Please subscribe to my channel if you liked it. You can also find me on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. And remember to notice and celebrate miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.